I work on Bitbucket, and I work as the product manager on Bitbucket. So if anyone's got any questions afterwards, just stop by, and I'd love to talk to you about it. What we're going to talk about today is, it seems like there's a theme of questions about people have when moving from Subversion to DVCS, and what I want to do is sort of address these issues and talk about how the open source community is really driving what I think is going to be an innovative way in how we all use version control in the coming years. So Subversion has had these shortcomings that we've noticed for a while at Atlassian, and we're really starting to benefit from a couple of key changes when moving from Subversion to DVCS. And so the first one that really gets me excited is local commits. And so I don't know about you guys, but the way it works at Atlassian is it's considered really poor etiquette to check in code before all the unit tests pass or all the functional tests are working across IE, Firefox, Safari, you name it. And you know, when you work on projects, this can be quite a bit of work in order to get something done. And what ends up happening is we can go days or sometimes weeks without checking into our Subversion server. And so DVCS solves this by giving the option of local commits, which gives you more incremental save points. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. And so the next one that I think is really, really difficult with Subversion is I'm hearing and talking to a lot of you up at the Bitbucket booth, is that you might not have access to the code that you want to contribute to. So, you know, maybe you have read access to the code, but then what happens when you need to contribute back? And the third thing that we're really seeing as a trouble with Subversion, that is merging. I don't know about you guys, but I tend to avoid branches wherever possible, just simply because the merging between the branches and getting the code back up to trunk or copying it across to a different Subversion server that might have the same set of code, it just doesn't work. And so DVCS really sets out to solve these problems. And so the first thing I really want to say is DVCS is really easy, and I want you guys not to be intimidated by DVCS if you're thinking about making the switch. And the one thing that I really want you to walk away from this presentation knowing is that there's a new workflow model that is available to you when you switch to DVCS. And the thing is it's fork, code, and pull. And this is a new model that we're seeing with open source projects. And what I'd like to do is I'll just sit here and talk about what each one of these steps means, and then maybe you guys can think about how you can apply this new workflow approach to your daily development. So the first thing that you really got to learn about in DVCS is a concept called forking. And in Subversion or any of the other open source projects I've worked on in the past, forking has really been this negative word that means that there's going to end up becoming fragmentation. And you know, a perfect example of this would be the BSD projects. There's NetBSD, there's FreeBSD, and what ends up happening is the contributions to those projects don't end up flowing back and forth between each other. In DVCS, what forking is an incredibly useful tool that, or opportunity that says, I'm going to take this repository and I want to copy all of the revision data, all of the branch data, the tag data, and the commit data, and I'm going to make a clone of it over here in which I'm going to interact with. And then later on, what I can do is I can take my contributions to this code base, and because we share the same lineage, we can end up doing much more powerful merging. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. And the other bit that you really need to think about is that because it's so easy to fork and because you want to be forking, you need to think about where is the central repository. So on the Bitbucket project, for example, right now we're working on a new feature that we're going to release in a couple of months, and what we've done is we've forked our main branch. And we're making our contributions on this branch, and the developers are committing back and forth to it, and it excuse me, becomes very easy to merge the code back and forth between these. And just to show you how popular forking can be, I picked one of the projects off of Bitbucket here, and for this particular open source project, there was 336 forks. Now, the reason that that's so powerful is because it makes it much easier for people to contribute back to these projects. And as the project owner, you can follow who are the people that are potentially trying to contribute back to your project. So for coding. So we did fork, now we're on coding. So coding is one of the places that you're going to immediately notice a benefit to your daily life when you switch to DVCS. And the reason that you're going to notice it is because of the local commits. I love this. I work on my projects in small units of work. So maybe I work on it for an hour, or I finish a function, or I finish a series of functions that need to interact with each other. And then what I want to do is I want to save this. Now, normally what I would do is I would avoid committing this to the Subversion branch, potentially poisoning any other work that my coworkers are doing. With DVCS, I can do individual chains, storage or commits of these chain sets on my box. And then when I'm done with this series of changes, I push these chain sets up to Bitbucket. And it's a much more natural flow to the way that you end up coding. And the other bit that I like about it is that I often go off on these tangents when I'm coding. And because I have these natural save points, I can quickly revert, whereas in the past I would just simply throw away everything that I was doing. And sometimes I would end up reconstructing work that I've already done, which is an incredible waste of time. And because you also have local commits, a benefit that we don't really notice it much here in our San Francisco office, but when you have distributed teams all over the world, network reliability can sometimes be difficult. So what ends up happening is because you have local commits, you don't have to worry about having internet access in order to do your commits or perform things such as doing an annotation or figuring out what the diff is between two revisions. All of that data is right there on your box, because when you fork, you're downloading all of the repository information to your machine. So you can get offline commits. So if you're on an airplane like me, I fly back and forth from Sydney, that's a 14-hour flight. There's a lot of work that can be accomplished during that time. And so you've forked your repository, you've coded your change, and let's say, let's stick with the open source model here. Now what happens is you want to contribute back to the project that you're working on. And in the past, what you would have done, and I still find myself doing this, is I have to create a series of patches. And there's nothing more than I hate in software development, and it's creating a patch, attaching it to a Jira issue, or emailing it to an open source project, and then figuring out where to apply it, and then if they reject my code change, then I have to go back and create a new patch set. In DVCS, because we can follow the lineage of the code as it develops, what happens is the merges become much easier. And because they share the same lineage, and sites like Bitbucket can track this lineage, what ends up happening is we have a feature that we're going to release next week called pull request. And what this does is between branches or between forks, you can identify the delta between the two repositories. And what you do in this case is you can type a description about what the changes that you've made after you've committed it to the Mercurial server, and you click Create Pull Request. And then what happens is the repository owner is notified of this change. And then right on the server, through a single click merge, they can click Accept or Deny. And if they click Accept, the code is server-side merged across the branches or across the forks directly into Bitbucket. And the next time somebody checks out, they'll download those new change sets from the master fork. Now, this is the way that all of the open source projects seem to be moving, and I really, really encourage you guys to do this. And again, like I said a moment ago, the model that I think really, really works for us, and we're seeing work in more and more teams across Atlassian, is the fork, code, and pull. And so, of course, you can try all of this stuff on Bitbucket, and if you guys haven't looked at it, it's totally free source code hosting for an unlimited number of public and private repositories with unlimited disk storage. So that's it.